I'm Bob Unger, the Vice President of the local chapter. Keith Mikas is the President. Lloyd Rose is the Treasurer, and Dave Crow, who's actually online here with us, is the Secretary and also is the editor of our newsletter. Tonight's meeting is everything about EVs. And the reason for that is that coming up in a few weeks is the International Auto Show, and we are going to be essentially being the ambassadors for the electric vehicles there. So this is sort of a dry run to cover some of the basics. If there's anything that you see that should be corrected or added or may not make sense, it's one thing I've learned from other experience teaching is once you understand something and you teach it, you don't understand what it is that other people don't understand. So anything that you can do to help make this type of presentation better and give you an idea of what you can do if you're going to be one of the volunteers, which I hope you all will volunteer. That's what this meeting's about, is to try to cover the basics. Keith even said it could be even instead of 101, 001. And if it's a little too deep or not deep enough, that's what we want to know about. So the auto show is right at the end of the month. It's from December 9th to January 1st.
27th, no, 29th, yeah.
Yes. Don't want to add another 2 days. And we are actually going to be the guests of the New Car Dealers Association, where in the past we've been sort of hanging on to the SDG&E. And the way I've organized this talk tonight is the basics. I want to talk about vehicle types, the advantages of having an EV, charging, road trips, and some of the incentives. These are the types of things that I expect we would run into by people that are coming in from the general public that probably have no idea what an EV is, or maybe hostile EVs. And I'll start off trying to understand what the various vehicle types are. We have internal combustion engines, we have hybrid electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, fuel cell electric vehicles, and battery electric vehicles. The electric, well, we really should understand that the internal combustion engine has been around for a long time. We basically explode some fuel and some cylinders, which makes pistons go up and down and turns a crankshaft. But what started out as a pretty simple engine has now turned into a rather complicated mess that adds to expense. Hopefully it's been able to reduce some fuel consumption, but it's come at the expense of complication. And one ad I like on the radio that they talk about AM codes is, a bitch you didn't know that your car's transmission has over 800 moving parts. And I'm thinking, oh, my EV has two, the input gear and the output gear. So the internal combustion engine has seen better days. It's become very, very complicated. And that's one of the reasons why I like moving on to a electric vehicle. And the internal combustion engine cars will be banned in California starting in 2035. As opposed to that big, complicated mechanical monster.
I don't just start jumping in there. They're not really banned, I don't think. You just can't buy a new one.
Right.
You can only buy a used one, and of course, if you have one, you can keep on going. And probably if you bring it from out of state, you'll be able to still register it and so forth. So
probably, who knows what will actually be happening? Somehow that seems like a long way away. But on the other hand,
I think it's a long way away, and that's a talking point, I guess. But I think, well, EVs are prices coming down, everything else, that we're just going to be naturally switching anyway. People are going to be choosing them just because it's a better car, and that there's no reason to force people to switch. There are some people who are, we're dragging their knuckles or whatever, but most people are just going to say, yeah, it's a better car. I'm just going to drive it anyway. I don't care.
I think you're right. Electric vehicles use an electric motor, which is mechanically much simpler and smaller. And basically you feed electricity in and you get rotation out. And if you're not feeding electricity in, but you're rotating it, you get electricity out, which allows us to do regenerative braking and other things I'll talk about a little bit later. The hybrid electric vehicle has added a motor and a small battery, but it still keeps the basic internal combustion engine drivetrain. And the battery gets some charge while you're driving at highway speeds. You get a little bit of boosted acceleration that you wouldn't have had otherwise with the ICE. You can drive a short distance on battery power, but you still can only fuel it by pumping in some fuel into the tank.
Bob, if I
Yes.
can mention, since
Please jump in.
I've talked with the public for many years in this, and I'm always excited to do this. One thing about the hybrid electric vehicles is the misconception, and hopefully we'll cover a bunch of them here, that you'll get from the public is that they think a hybrid electric vehicle is a battery electric vehicle, or more generally referred to as an electric vehicle. And I stopped them right there and started going through a little a 2-minute 101 on what we're covering right here, so that they understand that no, if it doesn't have a plug to plug into it, it's not really an electric vehicle. This is just a more efficient ICE vehicle,
Right, and
in my mind.
by having both types of propulsion in there, it's actually more complicated.
Yeah, it is.
And for
Becky.
fun fact, they catch fire 3 times as much as a gas car, but that's a different story.
Oh, but that sounds like misinformation. You know, only electric vehicles catch fire.
Oh,
Actually, at 100 times less than a gas engine, but that's beside the point.
yeah, there's about 150,000 gasoline car fires per year in America.
I think that should say battery adds boost for acceleration, not the motor, because it primarily runs on the motor, but when it needs to accelerate, it kicks in the battery.
Right, right.
Well, yeah, the extra motor, battery driven motor in the hybrid electric is there to give it more torque, such that they can put an undersized ICE engine in there for steady state situations.
Yeah, but the word motor is confusing to most people because they use it synonymously with an ICE engine.
Okay, well, keep that in mind as we're talking to the public next a little bit later.
Yeah, electric motor. Okay.
And to drive home Dave's point that a hybrid electric vehicle is not an EV, although Toyota seems to want to promote it as such.
Yep.
But they came out with a pretty nice vehicle. That Prius certainly started getting some great gas mileage by adding the electric motor and making it into a hybrid. Then if we do add a plug to it, we have a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And so this would actually qualify as electric vehicle. So you can plug it in to charge. It's got some more range and you can use it just as an electric vehicle. But from what I'm reading, in a lot of cases, people buy these things to get electric vehicle credit, but they may just go ahead and fuel it all the time with petroleum.
Yeah.
My son-in-law has a plug-in hybrid, and I think he's never charged it once.
Kind of a waste of some good technology.
Got him
Another
got him the express lane.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, a waste of money too.
Another type of electric vehicle is the fuel cell electric vehicle, in which case there's a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen, which is used to produce the electricity. It still requires going to a fueling station, of which so far they're very few and far between. I had a neighbor, I live out in El Cajon, and he had to drive to Del Mar in order to get a refuel. So that was not very convenient.
Yeah, right now I think there's 2 hydrogen fueling stations in San Diego, and statewide there's about 75 total.
So it's not really all that convenient to have a fuel cell electric vehicle.
No.
But the ones we really like, and that we're promoting, are the battery electric vehicles, where the only fuel storage is in a battery, and the battery size determines what the range is of that vehicle.
There's actually another category here that is kind of mixed up with the plug-in hybrid EV, and that's the range extender motor, like on the BMW i3, that really doesn't drive the car. It's just a generator. And there's some other car that just came out with that too. I can't remember what it is right now. But it's an electric vehicle. It only runs on electricity. It only has electric motor, except for the gas motor doesn't drive anything. And that's what the old Volt was that way, I think, as well as the BMW i3. So it's a different kind of plug-in.
Yeah, there's some variations, and I frequently see somebody that gets an electric vehicle and they think they've come up with a great idea to tow a generator behind them to recharge their car on the road when they run out of juice.
Yeah, you'll hear those.
So what are the advantages of EVs? What do we want to advertise and promote? Well, one of the primary things is that there's a reduced fuel cost. Anyone that's looking for some economy, that's great. Another thing is less maintenance, less toxic for the environment. And personally, I find that they're relaxing to drive. You're no longer, the word drive is like when you used to have the horses and you had to crack the whip in order to make them go. No longer are you looking at a hill and saying, I think I can, and have to accelerate to be able to get some momentum. It just does what you want it to do. And so I did some rough calculations on fuel costs. If we take a $5 gallon for gasoline, take approximately 25 miles per gallon as the fuel efficiency, that comes out to 20 cents per mile for fuel. If you use an electric vehicle and you charge at home, where we can get a 15 cents a kilowatt hour rate and figure approximately 3 miles of range for every kilowatt hour, that's only 5 cents a mile. That's a pretty good size saving. And even if you go out to a public fast charger using something like Electrify America, where it's 48 cents a kilowatt hour, you get 16 cents. So it's still much cheaper to go with an electric vehicle than it is to go with gas just for the fuel.
Yeah, and an example of that is on every EPA sticker that it's called a Monroney, the big white sticker that's on new cars before they're sold. That details out all the options you have in the car, and then on the right hand side it shows the efficiency of that car. And within all of that data, there's a couple of large numbers on there. One number is for electric cars, and this is always an advantage, is based on national averages of all these parameters that Bob just mentioned. It will show you a total cost advantage or reduction in fuel cost over 5 years of operating that car. Typically, that number is somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 for an electric vehicle. That's how much you're saving in just fuel cost.
And that adds up.
Yeah.
And also, there's much less maintenance. None of this oil change, tune-up, spark plugs, timing belts, smog check. And because of regenerative braking, you seldom if ever have to do a brake pad replacement. And there's a complicated transmission. For an EV, pretty much other than changing the wiper blades, cabin air filter, and tires, there's really not much in the way of maintenance on an electric vehicle.
Yeah, so in general, the numbers come out to be somewhere between 40 and 50% less cost in maintenance than a comparable internal combustion engine car.
Roy, you got a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was noticing on the smog check, how about the catalytic converters? Here in Mexico, they don't have that problem of them being stolen so much, but
Yeah.
I can see in the United States that catalytic converters is a big business now. Couldn't you use that as a selling point too? That it doesn't have a catalytic converter. You know,
Well,
that could be your questions you have. Do you have an ICE car that has a catalytic converter? And have you or anybody you know had that catalytic converter stolen?
yes,
No.
up in
And
the
what
Bay
did it cost you? How's that?
my daughter in the Bay Area, they cut the catalytic converter out of her Prius while I was parked in the driveway, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it took about 8 or 9 months for Toyota to get a replacement for it. And she did not drive it that entire time and had to borrow cars from friends so she could get to work. It was a nightmare. But you know, that catalytic converter situation, that's not something that people think about until it gets stolen. So you've got a good point.
Well, you might kind of bring it up with somebody who's a really an ICE fanatic. You know, there's no way they're going to change it. Have you had your catalytic converter stolen or known anyone? I guess they cost over $1,000 or so, don't they? I have no idea myself.
And it's the older, less efficient ones that had a higher platinum content and other precious metals in it. So they targeted my daughter's 2010 Prius.
We had one stolen out of our 2004 Prius and it cost us, what, $3,500 to get it
Oh.
replaced?
Oh,
Fortunately, insurance covered most of that, but I'm sure they weren't happy.
You
no.
can't siphon your gas tank on an electric car either.
Yeah, and gas is explosive. Look at that car that ran into the customs building up there in Canada. The electric vehicles may catch fire, but they more smolder and then catch fire. It's not a big explosion.
Are they doing something where they're gonna be charging residents per mile driven?
So far, that's been tabled.
Good.
That's not just EVs, that's all cars though, I think, right now in San Diego.
Yeah, they're looking at that as the way to fund the roads, or at least fund something that they'll call the roads.
Okay.
And another benefit is that there are fewer or less emissions when you're driving an electric vehicle. That significantly more metric tons of CO2, and the fact that you can use your solar panels to charge your car means you may not even need to use any of the grid power to be your primary motivation. Charging.
Let's also go back and say that your EV is fueled by domestic fuels versus imports that may support terrorist nations. I don't know, but your electricity is generally domestically generated. Even if you're burning coal, it's coal from the USA.
Yeah, but I've been through Wyoming and they got some big pits there. One thing that people need to sort of understand is that there are 3 levels of charging. Level 1 is basically a typical wall outlet, and you can get about 3 miles of added range for every hour that you're plugged in. Level 2, you get about 30 miles added per hour you're plugged in, and this is what you might typically find in the home or at work or a destination charger such as a motel or in some shopping centers.
Shopping centers, yeah.
And the third level, level 3, is the fast DC charging, where you can get about 300 miles of range added for every hour you're plugged in. And there's several different brands, and driving a Tesla myself, I'm very familiar with the Tesla superchargers, but there are others, the Electrify America, etc., that have other charging stations, and all of that is being built out. And virtually all of the car manufacturers are now have adopted the Tesla standard going forward, so their cars will also be able to use the Tesla network. And that brings me to the different types of charging plugs. Tesla's named their standard the North America Charging Standard. It has one type of plug, no matter what type of level of charging you're doing. It's about the size of a banana, easily held in the hand, and the cable's not necessarily too unwieldy. Whereas the J1772 and the CCS connectors can be kind of bulky. And as I said,
Didn't even mention CHAdeMO, I guess, because that's still used on the Nissan Leaf, but it's more or less dead.
I didn't put it in there, but because I don't think about it's going to be me coming to the show is going to be expecting to use the CHAdeMO. I think we can bring that up if someone asks about it at the show.
I think they're still selling the Nissan Leaf out there with the CHAdeMO
That's
connector.
true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Venerable Leaf.
And they're still installing chargers out there. The Electrify or EVgo stations still have a CCS and a CHAdeMO on
Okay,
each
well,
charger.
Maybe I should modify that slide to indicate that.
It does add confusion to the thing. I think the real message though is pretty much everybody is switching to the NACS, and it'll be a whole lot simpler in the future.
Oh yeah, I like the story where Jim Farley was taking a road trip with his family, and the sons kept asking, "Hey, Daddy, why can't we charge over there?" And a week later, he made a deal with Tesla to add Ford to the family.
Hey, Bob, this is Larry. I finally got in. And I heard you talking about Nissan Leaf. I was at the Nissan dealers today. Yes, they still sell the Leaf. two versions of it, and of course the Aria. The Leaf does have CHAdeMO and the Aria does have CCS.
Okay,
And one of the nice things that they shared is that when you get an EV at Nissan, this was the Massey Nissan in National City, they now have a hookup with a company that will help install a charging station in your home as part of the deal. And the name is Assurant EV1 times Treehouse. I don't know, but they can incorporate the cost of that in your loan, and they can arrange to do it at your home. There's the steps in here, and but that's why I told them, hey, I've been waiting for dealers to start doing more of that, so they make it easy for people, so they don't have to worry about permitting and all that stuff. This program handles it. So that's and then GM. I stopped at GM. They also said that through the GM USA website, there's up to 1,500 covered for the cost of, and they can introduce some electricians for that.
That's a good deal.
well, the more we can get the level of pain cut down, the better.
Hello, Ramona.
And the people that can be charging at home, this is the time of use 5 rate, which has a basic monthly service fee. But if you, I've forgotten, when I last did the calculation, that if you drive like over 150 miles or something, you could
Okay.
take that back.
Yeah. Okay.
But so the overnight rate is less than 15 cents. And that's what I used as the low rate in that calculation I gave earlier, as far as how much it costs per mile to drive your car. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more than Electrify America if you charge your car during the very peak times. But if you've got solar and your panels you're generating, you're probably going to feed your car directly instead of that. But it gives you the ability to make your charging rates somewhat deterministic. It's not like, what's the rate going to be on the next time you drive by a particular station?
For the $16 fee, I think it's if you charge more than 123 kilowatts a month, it pays for itself. It breaks even and
Yeah.
starts saving you money.
That's about 400 miles.
And again, it depends on your situation, because I did switch from the EV5 to the EV2 just because we have enough solar that I don't need $2,000 worth of, net metering credits to go away. Having a few $100s of net metering credits to go away is perfectly fine by me. So
It's all a matter of the calculations. I think Dave can
Yeah.
test it is not a simple ordeal to calculate the best deal with SDG&E.
No,
Or-
but also SCG&E, to at least to their credit, has a tool. Once they have 12 months of your charging history through how much they billed you, they can recommend a optimum cost-wise plan for you, and that's within their myaccount.sdg.com website.
sadly, since they updated the website about a year and a half or 2 years ago, or whenever it was, when they switched over and changed the way that green data was output and everything else, that calculation is just total crap now. If it works fine, I guess, if you don't have solar, but if you have solar, they don't count the part you generate and only what you use or something. And so, like, if I go on there and calculate it with my system, it says, oh, your annual bill will be $3,000, except for no, because I have solar, it's actually more like about $2,000 of net metering credit a year. So I can't trust that calculation at all. I have to do my own math.
Okay.
Those of us that have Teslas, we've got a great supercharging network that I don't know if many of you have heard of the Lincoln Highway, but back in the early 1900s when the gas car was coming out, a bunch of vendors that made tires and lights, headlights, and all the other accessories said, we've got the problem of the chicken and the egg. Do we have cars or roads first? So they built a road from New York to San Francisco called the Lincoln Highway. And when Tesla started selling their electric vehicles, they knew there'd be the chicken, the egg of chargers and cars. So they started building out the supercharger network, which is now becoming available to other makes besides Tesla. But there are other apps, such as what's showing here on the screen, that allow you to get access to the other brands of charging networks that are also being built out across the US.
Ironically, the Lincoln Highway just recently started putting in some CCS chargers, but some of them are kind of sketchy. But I did drive the Lincoln Highway, like it was last year, from Carson City all the way over to Great Basin National Park anyway. And then I kind of boarded and we went across the whatever, some other highways to get across Utah. We gave up on the 50, but that was an interesting trip across 50. They could do some superchargers on it, by the way, but yeah, you still have some DC fast chargers on there.
Good, good. Well, I know that from my experience taking road trips, it's kind of interesting to see what the US looks like from down on the ground. And it's a big country with a lot of different places to see. And electric vehicles are a pretty nice, calm way to make that road trip. Speaking of which, that's the next section to talk about is road trips. And one thing that people always seem to worry about is range anxiety. But to me, it's the bladder and the stomach that's really the governing factor. That most EVs have at least 200 miles, and that's going to be several hours of driving. And not too many people are going to want to just keep going unless they're a long haul trucker or trying to just do a cannonball run from point A to point B. And I found that usually with a fast charger, the car is charged up long before my wife is ready to come out of the restaurant, the restroom, or the store that's in the same area as the charger. And there comes trip planning. Some people think this is a big drawback to electric vehicles, but I think that it's something that should be done no matter what kind of vehicle you're driving. Because you get to know a little bit about the route you're going on and some of the places you may want to stop that have nothing to do with just getting from point A to point B. A better route planner, which I understand has recently been purchased by Rivian, is a good one to use that helps you find chargers along the way for whatever route you want to take, as well as some of the other amenities along the way. That makes the road trip being the journey that it is, it's not simply getting from point A to point B. And Apple and Android Auto can be used. And if you're charging just the meal breaks, unless you're going to be planning on eating in your car as you drive, usually the time to eat is plenty to get charged up. And if you do a little planning in advance, many motels have electric vehicle charging as part of the perks of just staying there. And many, at least from my last experience, there's no charge for it. So if you can spend the night and drive away with a full charge, that definitely helps out the cost of an EV trip. And how about all those incentives that are out there? And this is where probably I had to get more input from Larry. We got monies for the EVs. We've got the US government Inflation Reduction Act up to $7,500. Depends on where the car is made, what the price of the vehicle is, what your income is, a bunch of other factors such as that. You can get a similar credit for a used EV up to $4,000. The new EV Cal government, I guess, is sort of standing by at the moment. SDG&E has some teachers and first responders. There's some other grants and CARB things. We got the Bureau of Automotive Repair trying to get some things retired. Anyway, there's a long list of different things.
Do we have any new people on the line that want to hear about those?
I don't know.
Who do we have that's on the line that wants to hear some of that?
I would like to hear, even though I just bought my second EV, I'd like to hear about some of the things I may not know about to get as far as rebates and things.
Well, and of course, in January, the tax credit may change on a lot of vehicles based on the battery type type of minerals and where the battery is made may change for some vehicles, but the IRS website has a section on EV tax credits. And if you click on the link there, that one, it tells you how much, if you make too much money, then you can't get the full tax credit. It lists all of those numbers. If it was for a new or used vehicle, there's a separate amount. And so it's if you have a specific question on those things, that's probably easier to go over. But
Can you put that screen back up, Bob, with the list? There we go. Okay, because I mean, I know about the tax credit, and I was approved for this. I made it by 4 days for the deadline to automatically get the CVRP. So I was lucky.
Oh,
on
really?
that. Yeah, they closed
What-
it September 6th, and I think I applied September 3.
good for you. Yeah. Well, the other California rebate, they have programs for Clean Cars for All. That's to help lower income people, and that can range from 7,000 to 12,000, depending if you're in a certain zip codes or not, and also if you have an older 2009 vehicle or older that you want to get rid of, that trade in. And so depending on the zip code, and if you can turn in the vehicle, that there's a range for that. And that is, sponsored by San Diego Air Pollution Control District for our area. And you can Google Clean Cars for All. It's actually administered by Grid Alternatives. So you can look up Grid Alternatives for that information on that as well, for the specifics. And again, it's for the areas that are considered where there's excess pollution or communities of concern. In San Diego, that's along like Barrio Logan, the west end of National City and Chula Vista. And then some areas like near El Cajon or Indian reservations, they have special amounts for those people as well. Is that number 4? Is that still active? I was wondering about that myself. Have you anybody?
I don't know that this slide was all from Keith, so I did not.
I'm gonna-
fact check it.
Yeah, because I just went to a elementary school teachers meeting last night. And I was wondering if that's still valid. So I'm going to look that up. So we'll let you know next time. What was any other questions?
What is number 10 about Costco? Is that for financing a car?
Well, I think they have cars in front of the Costco's, and sometimes they're electric vehicles, and they have a special deal or program for those. So just like they have for gas cars, sometimes they have it for electric cars. And sometimes you can get like $700 discount card that you could use at Costco. And they usually have a reasonable rate because they kind of bargain with the dealers on what that amount or the factory as to what the amount would be. A lot of the cars now they're adding, because they know there's a shortage of EVs, they're adding a dealer. They won't call it a markup because sometimes the GM or Ford don't want them to put markups on there, but they'll say, oh, here we have a special coating on the car, or we've added a security system. So that's another 1,450 and another 1,450. So that adds up to 3,000. So a lot of dealers are adding those things that are special, dealer additions. But yeah, Costco, I've known friends that have gone through Costco. I know one friend who bought a used Chevy Bolt, and she got it for, it was actually over $25,000 total, but they had added some things that aren't counted as the actual cost for the car. If it's under 24,000, then they can get up to 30% of the cost of the car. So that and it's more than 2 years old, So my friend went out and got a used one, and I asked, well, is it more than 2 years old? Yes. And how much did you actually pay for it? And it turns out she was qualified for that $4,000. Now, if you bought a car that was under 13,000, then that amount would shrink because you multiply, like, for example, it was a $10,000 car times 30% as a $3,000 tax credit on the used vehicle, as long as it's more than 2 years old.
Are they having shortages of EVs? I'm reading that they've got overflow on the lots of dealers, or is that just the negative publicity that they're going for?
It depends on which EVs. Yeah, you know, I think Teslas are going off, are still selling pretty rapidly. Some of these EVs, they're $60,000, $70,000, and not everybody wants to spend that much on a car, even though they can get some tax credits on them. When I was at the GM dealer, they were still selling Chevy Bolts, and they're going to stop manufacturing the current versions at the end of this year. They just started selling Blazers, electric Blazers that have the initials RS. I forget what that stands for, but those are all electric. They're using the Ultium batteries, which have an 8-year, $100,000 warranty. And the question whether that's going to get a tax credit or not, we have to wait and see next year if they qualify. They have to probably do some paperwork. The other GM that's supposed to be a lower cost is Equinox. That's currently only gas version. They couldn't tell me when that version is coming out next year.
The Bolt is the one that's more scarce though, as far as being
Yeah,
able to
they
buy
actually
things.
in National City, they actually had some new ones and some used ones on their lot. So, but yeah, they go because they're one of the most affordable EVs, and they go to over 250 miles on a charge. So that's very, if it fits your lifestyle and you can fit in the car. I had one friend who
Outside.
would not fit in my Leaf because he had long legs, but he got into a Bolt and he fit in fine. So he ended up buying a used boat. So, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Hey, Larry, quick question for you. Thank you for your information. Hey, I'm wondering,
John.
is there any limit on using these incentives? For example, if a person has used incentives in the past, a few years back, to purchase an electric vehicle, any issue with using the same incentive over again? Like I'm thinking of the SDG&E teacher first responder. Can you use that a second time? And what about the CVRP? If you bought a EV and you qualified for that once, you got a rebate, can you get another one?
The
I can answer
CVRP
you
is,
on the CVRP, because I just researched that today to find out if I'm still going to get my second one. As long as your first one was prior to December of 2019, you can get a second one.
but as Carol mentioned, that's phasing out. And so unless you've applied for it, the CVRP is no longer going to be available. They're shifting to these other incentive programs for lower income people, unless they bring that back. So, but yeah, there were some limitations, and I think I had reached my limits myself, but I could have had put my wife's name on the car and use her name to get the CVRP, but the program's no longer available.
Right.
John,
We tapped into that one 5 times because I got it before they had any limit. Then I got one after they did 2 limits, or I got 2 after they did 2 limits. And then my wife got one, and then we got a second one for her because she got it before 2019. And yeah, we maxed it out 5 times.
good for you.
Great.
And another change that's coming up is that the IRA, the federal credit, is going to be on the hood instead of having to file as part of your taxes.
Oh,
You can get it as at the time of purchase, which will make a big difference.
that's
Although
right.
Some of the other requirements are tightening up.
But the
makes it a lot
dealers-
more convenient.
the dealers have to be registered with the IRS in order for that to be available. Yeah, for the new cars, if you're modified adjusted gross income, if for a joint or filers under 300,000 or a surviving spouse, head of household 222 to 225,000, and for everybody else 1,000. I'm sorry, 150,000. If your modified gross income is underneath that, you can qualify. And if you fib about it and the IRS finds out about it later, you have to pay it back. So,
Larry,
the
one
youth-
question I have about that is that in the old days, you had to have a certain amount of income in order to even have enough income to have $7,500 worth of taxes. Do you need to have that much income in order to get the full 7,500, or do you get that no matter what your income is?
you know, I don't have 100% certainty in answering that, because I'm even confused. Because I know in the past, yeah, you had to have that much liability, that you had to pay that much, or else you couldn't get it all back. So I don't know why they would change that here, but
Well, if it's gonna come off the top of the cost of the car in the future, I don't know how they could regulate that.
No, they won't. And that's part of the advantage to lower income people is that you can have the dealer capture that full 7,500, give you a discount on your purchase price or your lease, and then you get the benefit to more.
so Dave, you've read somewhere that you don't have to have that much, liability and taxes?
Exactly, because the dealer is going to collect the 7,500, just like they have been historically with the leases, and supposedly giving you a break on your lease rate because of the dealer getting the 7,500.
Well, for the lease ones, that I agree, but if they're taking it off the purchase,
right,
then I'd like to see that in writing myself. Probably have to research on the IRS website some more.
It's, it seems I read recently, following up on what Dave was saying, that as a buyer, you have the choice of taking it either as a point of sale rebate or as a tax credit. And like you were saying, Dave, that opens up this incentive to more people. Because like Larry was saying, there are some people that are not going to have a $7,500 tax liability, but they're still going to be able to benefit from, getting a $7,500 rebate on a vehicle.
Yeah, I think I put that in the newsletter this month, and Keith put a mention of that in his president's message on the newsletter.
I see Roy patiently waiting with his hand up. What are the rebates like in Mexico?
Zero.
Oh,
There's a very, 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 very negative opinion of renewables here in Mexico. The Mexican president is building a refinery in the mangroves of the state of Tabasco. The Federal Electric Commission will give you no discounts whatsoever unless you're at a certain level. I keep saying I want to put solar panels in, but it's virtually impossible. So the general view is very negative, because for the Mexicans, petroleum oil is power and freedom, and the whole concept is built about that. Well, my question is, have you guys looked in what your neighbors are going to be making soon in Carlsbad, the Aptera? Will there be any discounts for that?
My understanding is that it will not qualify for the federal tax credit or the $7,500 rebate, because it's not a car or truck, but it falls into the category of motorcycle.
Right. Well, hopefully something will come up in the next year or so for people in the States. And here, I think for us here in Mexico, I was just doing on some napkin calculations. If I can get an average of 30 miles a day charge where I live here in Jalapa, which has like 330 days of sun. So if I can get 30 miles a day, that'll give me almost 10,000 miles of free range, if I'm right. Isn't that right? 30 times 30 is 900, right? A month. And you take it. So, I mean, for us, it'll be incredible because we get rid of all the hassle of going to the filling station and all the other advantage, but so that I'm hoping within a year or so I'll be able to get my Aptera.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll move on. The state of California does have a web page which helps you determine what all the different incentives are and the types of vehicles, brought to you by the Air Resources Board. So driveclean.ca.gov gets you to that website. And Keith has noted that there's some holiday specials. Here's one that runs through January 2nd that lets you get a GMC. I didn't know that one was an electric, but got a pre-owned Polestar 2. So it looks like there's some other options available. And then he shows an example of buying a used 2020 Chevy Bolt EV, how all the incentives add up. And that brings me to the conclusion for what I've prepared. Is there anything else that we should have covered or we want to be able to cover when we meet the public at the auto show? And I'd kind of like to take a poll of all the attendees here. Was this useful? Are you able to tell your friends and neighbors and explain to them all the benefits of an EV? And if not, what can we do to help?
Well, one other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of times people say EVs are too expensive. And I have two examples of, if you find the right condition, they're not that expensive. And my two examples, I may have mentioned before, I met a guy who was a hospice nurse. He was driving all over San Diego County to going north and south for all of his work, spending $700 a month on gasoline. Then he bought an Audi, which were not cheap, maybe more than $50,000.
Yeah.
But they included 3 years of free charging at Electrify America. So he was going to save $700 a month on gas, which would go to his payment. And even after that, he could still charge at his home after 3 years at a low cost with electric vehicles. And I think he had solar too. And then another example is I met a guy just the other day. He was I went swimming at the Las Palmas pool in National City, and they had put in some charging stations, including DC quick chargers by ChargePoint. And he was charging a Polestar 2. He had purchased that used. I think that was normally $60,000 to $70,000. He was able to get it used for $35,000 around that. And then he's I guess single. He can do Lyft full time whenever he wants to. And he said last year he made $130,000 doing Lyft. So depending on your situation, it might seem expensive, but if you can fit into your situation, it can be quite a good deal. So those are...
Patty, did you have any comment or thoughts?
No, thank you for asking them.
Was this useful to fill in some gaps, or was it just a refresher, or how was it for you?
It was very informative, a lot of good information. We are brand new Tesla owners. We took delivery exactly a month ago. So we're still learning a lot, but this was very helpful.
I think
but it's usually pleasant things, like nothing like hearing, oh no, all the we're 1 million Teslas are going to be recalled, and then wait a minute, it's just an over-the-air update that doesn't impact us as drivers at all. So.
Exactly. It just made for some real scary headlines, but I've learned to distrust a lot of media nonsense along the road anyway.
I think one thing you didn't cover, Bob, is that when you talked, the first thing you talked about was different kinds of vehicles, which is fine. You know, when you said, you know, gas and electric and hybrid and whatever else. But the thing to note now is that when I first got into EVs a few years ago, you know, whatever, the choices were about 10 years ago, actually, I guess, whatever. The choice was, you know, the Tesla I'd never even really heard of, and like a Nissan Leaf or a Smart for 2 EV. You know, there were very few choices. But now when you're talking about choices for vehicles, you actually have a pretty good gambit in the EV world. It's not just like, well, you can either drive a Nissan Leaf or you can drive, you know, I want a pickup or I want an SUV or I want a sedan or I want a sports car. Those are all represented now inside of the EV world. You can buy a truck, you can buy a super little sports car, you can buy an SUV, and they're all the flavors that people may want now. So you're not looking at just saying, oh, I'm thinking about an EV. I'm thinking about what's the best car for my family, because people are looking at, you know, like I need an SUV, or I, you know, there's not too many vans out there yet, but you know, I need something to be a soccer mom and all the kids around to, you know, whatever what's your need. Let's find a car that matches that. That just also happens to be an EV. It's not just you're looking for an EV, but you're looking for a car that satisfies your need and is an EV.
John, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Bob, I sure do. Yeah, by the way, thank you. Excellent presentation tonight. You know, I think, Bob, it might be a good idea to address, before meeting with the public, like you were mentioning, this narrative that has been growing, I'd say, over the last month or two, with regard to this EV slowdown. There's been reports, for example, of Ford is scaling back on the F-150 Lightning. They're scaling back on the Mustang Mach-E. Other EV manufacturers or you know, car companies that make EVs are also scaling back. There's a perception, a narrative, how true it is, you know, who knows, but that you know, that a large portion of the public is rejecting EVs. There've been reports of there've been some reliability studies where Rivian owners have expressed, you know, concerns about reliability. They don't rate well in comparison with like Toyota and Honda, which are traditionally rate very high. There's the you know, the issue with charging as well, which hasn't happened. You know, there've been, despite the Infrastructure Act and all that, the charging network hasn't developed. So the perception, maybe not so much in California, but in the other states probably more so, that you know, that there's sort of this slowdown of EVs, and you know, they're not, you know, people are not going after them the way they thought the companies thought they would. And I don't know, I've been hearing a lot about that. I'm wondering if people raise those concerns or bring those topics up, how should we address them?
Well, since theoretically, if they're hearing that Fords are cutting back, they could go over and talk to the Ford representative. And I believe there'd be GM representatives to talk about Bolts and Hummers and things like that.
I think the narrative really is, they say EVs are not selling, but it's really Fords are not selling. And, you know, and
Right.
and whatever else is not selling, because people say, well, I can buy a Ford for $60,000, or I can buy a Tesla for $50,000, and the Tesla's a better car. I'm going to buy the Tesla. So, you know, Tesla's making everything they're selling everything they can make. It's just the other manufacturers don't have a compelling product, and that's why they're not selling. And so they got to come back to the drawing board and come up with a compelling product.
And I think that also there's that transition. They said they're going to go to the Tesla charging standard, and so some people may not want to buy a car now if the plug's not going to work for all of those Tesla charging stations. But I think if we can still say yes. I think that I've been hearing that narrative that they're not selling. It's a little bit of a PR thing, an excuse. But I think if they find a vehicle that fits their needs, as I gave my two examples, that save them money and it works for them, there's no reason they shouldn't buy a car. But they have to find one that fits their needs. And Harvey was mentioning a 7-seater. Well, the Rivian, their SUV is a 7-seater. And there are those, so those are available, although those are some a little bit more expensive. Have to
The
be able to-
EV9 is also not, I don't think it's expensive as a Rivian, but it's also a nice 7-seater. That
And
is,
the same
is
with
out
the
there.
Model Y 7-seater.
So that's a pretty tight 7-seater. But
Yeah.
yeah, Model X is a better 7-seater from that perspective, but the Kia EV9 is actually, I think, a pretty nice little
Kia
car.
EV9. Mhm.
I see Roy's got his hand up now too.
Yeah, Roy.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I keep, forgive me for not speaking up earlier. You can see the news about the $25,000 Tesla. And I think that's just around the corner in as far as time. I mean, probably within the next 2 years at most. And especially when they get the factory going here in Mexico, it's going to be just gangbusters. What do you think of that, of the cheaper Tesla models?
I think that's just adding more pressure to the other manufacturers. Myself, is that again trying to come up with something compelling to compete, and that's kind of come into play. The $25,000. I think also the other delays are. You're right. The tax incentive thing is coming up next year. Some people may be holding off until that tax incentive next year. There is the NACS question too. That when is that going to come out? And do I want to buy a car with CCS now that I didn't have to use an adapter with for the rest of my life or until I sell the car? And for me, the answer was yes, I did. I went and got a CCS card. Don't care. I'll just use the adapter. It'll be fine. But I'm an experienced EV guy, not a new guy coming off the street too. So,
Mhm.
Right. May I ask a question, just a general question? You can see I'm an Aptera ambassador. How many of you of the other 14 people that are on that call would be interested in buying an Aptera? Do you think it's viable or not?
I like the Aptera actually. And I wouldn't mind having one, but it doesn't satisfy. Again, back to the thing I said. What are my needs for a vehicle? And I need something that's a little bigger. I like a little bigger, a little more road trippier. Well, actually, that's a pretty good road tripper car. But I mean, put my wife and my dog and all my crap in it. It doesn't quite fit in the Aptera.
Yeah.
But
I'm
it fits in-
also an Aptera investor and an ambassador, and I have 2 reservations for them. And by the way, Roy, it's actually 40 miles a day from the sun, not 30, as the max.
Right,
And-
right.
And I think I think it's going to really end up being a pretty good product, and hopefully they'll start delivering them by the end of next year.
I think it's going to be a great product. I really do. I think it's a pretty cool little car.
What's your name again? I don't see it on the Zoom call here, because if you could get in contact with me further, hopefully I can go up in March or April of next year when they start the production. See, my whole idea is at age 73, I'm taking this as an adventure to promote Rotary and just have the vehicle parked here in front of my house. And when I want to drive from here to Veracruz, which is about, 120 kilometers, the round trip is not going to cost me anything at all.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
that's what I'm looking for is my old man's adventure vehicle. And it just the whole idea of promoting Rotary and having this whole caravan traveling from city to city and town to town all over Mexico, it really is appealing to me.
Any more comments that have to do with training the public at the auto show? I see Todd, you've got your hand raised.
I do, yeah. Sorry, I had to step away for a few minutes, so I hope you didn't already answer this question. But when I talk to people about EVs, I find that, gosh, maybe 30 or 40% of the time I get some objections, and I'm just wondering about objection handling. And the objections I've heard so far are, this one was kind of crazy. I was in Canada and this person said, I heard that the tires, they burn tires, and the tire rubber that goes into the atmosphere is worse than the gas emissions that go into the atmosphere, which was pretty crazy. And then another person was complaining about the minerals in the batteries, and another person was complaining about the emissions from making EVs being worse than the gas in the ICE cars. But anyway, I could see myself losing my temper with people if they come to the booth and they ask me goofy questions, they raise these goofy objections. And I think I just need to prepare myself ahead of time to stay calm.
My first comment is that the oil companies don't like competition, so they pay for those kind of articles. There's always a small midget of truth to them, but they're exaggerated.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
there
that's what I thought.
is, okay, Todd, there is a small amount of emissions into the air from the tires, but it is dwarfed incredibly by the tailpipe emissions. So it's everybody in that industry and is focused on that, is focusing on the emissions first. And yes, a follow-on will be to have better tires that don't emit so much.
But the thing is
Also-
too, all gas cars have tires as well, so that there's no difference on that part. And the EV maybe uses a little bit more rubber because it has more torque and maybe a little heavier, but really everybody's using tires, and gas cars use a lot more brake dust, put a lot more brake dust out than an EV. So
Exactly.
it probably averages out there.
Yeah, asbestos in the brake pads is a bad thing, very bad thing. I have a, let's see, was there, I'm trying to remember, Todd, was there another category? Oh, you
The
talked about
battery,
sourcing the
Yeah, the minerals for the batteries.
minerals for the batteries. We're gonna find a way to continue to do that. There is tendencies towards China having a larger part of that control. But you know, they're really not giving a balanced look at their transportation choice when they're doing that. They're just trying to come up with an excuse. So I would politely nod your head and say that's an interesting point, and don't spend your whole day with them trying to, you know, wrestle with the proverbial pig.
The one answer is pretty much is if you just want to Google something, you can really find the correct answer. I mean, you know, because the answers are out there, but for all those points, you can give that, you know, talking points of, yes, you know, it depends on what the vehicle is, but let's say it takes 2 years, you know, for that, for burning gas or burning on an EV to break even to where they're now equal, because maybe you have to front load the EV because it uses more pollutants or whatever it may be, or more resources to build a battery in the first place. But then when you start using it, it has zero, and so the gas car is using some. And so when it reaches a 2-year point, now the gas car is still using it, and the EV is doing nothing. So you're head in the game with the EV. And after a few years here, we still don't have enough batteries out there yet, but after a few years, when these batteries do start going, you know, south, or like cars start getting recycled, the recycled material will be obviously less consuming of environmental resources, because you're just reusing what we've already harvested. You can, once you've harvested it, it's not just harvest once and use it and then done like it is with oil. You harvest it, you use it in the battery, it runs out, you take it out of the battery, put it in another battery, you do it again and again and again and again and again and again.
you mean you can't recycle gasoline?
Not so much.
At least 95% of the battery materials in a battery can be recycled. That's the amount, at least. So
Right
that's
now.
what I say right now, correct. So
And
there's
so
a
it can only get
company-
better.
Yeah, Redwood Materials. I actually drive for Uber, and I get these questions a lot because I drive my Tesla for Uber a lot, to get people to ask me questions and things like that. And that's a big question I get all the time. And that's what I say. I said, you can't do that with oil. You can't recycle it. Once you burn it, it's done. It's in the atmosphere. Whereas with batteries, not only is it at least 95% recyclable, but they're more pure, the battery minerals in there. So it's easily recyclable, which you don't get obviously with oil.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Hey,
Did
yeah,
you-
I just wanted to circle back. Great discussion here, by the way, guys. I just wanted to circle back to what Roy threw out there with regard to the Aptera. Hey, Roy, I am a Aptera reservation holder. I am super excited about the efficiency of this vehicle, the solar aspect, not having to charge. You can run on the sunshine. The storage looks good on it. I'm not too excited about the fact that it's a 2-seater. Another thing I'm concerned about is safety. I make a lot of trips back and forth between San Diego and the LA area on Interstate 5 with all the trucks and 18-wheelers. And I'm wondering about driving the Aptera in that way. And so I want to find out, I imagine they're going to be doing crash tests on this thing once
Oh,
they
yeah.
get some of them built.
Yeah.
I want to find out how it performs because safety is a big concern, and I want to wait. So I do have a reservation, but I'm not entirely sold yet.
Well, that's great, John. I think you should get together with Neil and follow the what do you call it? The body is being made by the same ones that make Formula One race cars in Milan, Italy. Well, near Milan, Turin, or whatever it is. And it's supposed to be as safe as any as a Tesla. So I think if that's a parameter we're using, I mean, let me tell you, I feel the same situation here on Mexican roads. A Mexican friend, I was complaining about Mexican roads, Mexican roads years ago, and he says, what are you complaining about? Half of the Mexican roads are good and half are bad. 1 meter good, 1 meter bad. So, that's where our potholes have craters and our craters have potholes. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to be putting it to the test here in Mexico. But I understand what you're talking about. It's pretty intimidating to have a 18-wheeler pull up next to you, especially if you're on a little e-bike. I can tell you that'll scare your skivvies off. But I'm going to take the chance on it, and hopefully my wife and I will be traveling all over Mexico and part of the United States during the next, as soon as we can get the Aptera, we're hitting the road. Okay. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Neil, in San Diego. It'd be wonderful going to the plant with you.
Sure, that'll be good.
Okay. Forgive me for pushing so much for Aptera, but that's my old boy's dream. It's my bucket.
Well, I have seen some testing on it, though. At least they've talked about it, and it is supposed to be a very safe vehicle. I was concerned about that myself, because it looks kind of fragile, but supposedly they've done a lot of engineering into making it be a safe vehicle. I don't think it's done its crash testing yet, but that'll come out. Before it's even sold, some crash testing information will come out.
Well, I'd love
Marianne
to.
or Brian, we haven't heard anything from you. Any comments or feedback on what we've been talking about?
Not really, just listening.
Okay.
As long as it's useful and we run on feedback as to how we can improve for the next time. Brian, do you have anything to add? I see Tom has his hand up. Let's hear from
Yeah,
Tom.
Tom joined us. What's up, Tom?
Yeah. Hi, you guys. I just got off of a call with a bunch of shop teachers, and nice to see you, Ali. This is Wednesday night, so it's Ron's shop podcast, and we took a vote in regards to Cybertruck, and it was a pretty interesting meeting. Came out 10-7 in favor of the aesthetics. Almost everybody was really positive about some of the engineering, the 48-volt, this drive-by-wire stuff, and the molding of this new stainless steel alloy were some of the things that we geeked out on the call. But yeah, there was a really animated back and forth about the pros and cons of Cybertruck.
It'll be interesting to see how that takes off when some civilians get their hands on it. And
yeah, I was going to leave that call to join you guys when you started, but it was so interesting. I stuck with those guys. Unfortunately, I can't do 2 Zooms at once. I don't have the technology.
Kind of hard to pay attention to at the same time too. So
you probably know everything we've covered anyway. So
okay, I got 3 items. Has anybody seen the Cybertruck up at the UTC showroom?
Yes.
Is it still there? Do you know?
As far as I know, it's still there. I'm not sure whether they're going to be letting anybody actually get close enough to look inside, but
no,
been behind the ropes as far as I know.
Yeah. Was there a line to get in?
Not anything of any significance when I was there.
Okay, I guess that's other places. Okay, 2 more things. One is a little tidbit as we're talking about cost. and EVs are too high priced. Remember that the out the door average price of a new car now is $48,000. So look at the Hyundai and the Kias and the Nissan Leafs. They're all below that. The basic Tesla Model 3 is below that. So they're becoming very competitive in that realm. And secondly, the one thing that I always do when I talk to somebody and they're interested in EVs and they want to have a discussion of any type, I always make sure that I either one, ask them if they've ever driven an electric car, and then before the conversation is over, and I recommend to them that they go test drive an electric car, because that has been shown to make the biggest positive difference in people's attitude about electric cars, getting their foot on the accelerator. That's all I had.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Yeah, this is just a FYI. Next Tuesday, I'm going to be sitting in on a presentation about the EV Canoe. I've been seeing some YouTubes and advertisements about them. They're trying to promote themselves a little bit more strongly. I guess they have a contract with NASA or the military to develop trucks or something that they could use. But next Tuesday, I'm going to sit in on a webinar at 9 a.m. And if anybody's interested, let me know, and I could try to send you that information. So that's like a truck or a van. It could be a combination of that, and they have several different options that they can design it to work as.
Yeah, they sort of have a skateboard that they can configure to whatever you need.
Right.
Oh, one
They
more from
doing a steer by wire? That would certainly make that more versatile.
I'll find out next Tuesday.
Looks like we got
Bob, can I make a suggestion for your stand that you're gonna have? Will you be having a screen where you'll be reproducing any information about EVs, like sort of a loop?
No,
would
I
be-
don't think so, no.
Will you have all these cards that we had tonight?
You mean the slides? Certainly
Yeah.
could have the slides, but not planning on having any TV screen or anything like that, but we could have the slides.
Okay, because there's also a lot of information on Now You Know on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That you can use clips, and you can use a lot of the arguments that you mentioned. You could use those little 3-minute clips there and just have that running in the background, and people can sort of watch it. If you do have like a 20, 25 or 30-inch screen.
No, at this point we're just sort of the guests of the New Car Dealers Association. So at the moment we're just planning on having our pop-up tent and a table with a lot of literature and QR codes to direct them to other places.
If we could have those slides tonight, semi blown up, not giant, but it would give us talking points just to remember the things.
True. I see Larry and Todd with their hands up again.
Yeah, a lot of times did you say the dealers are going to have cars around our where our booth is going to be?
I don't know. All I know is that this year we are not piggybacking off of SDG&E.
Okay.
We are actually been invited by the New Car Dealers Association.
Okay, so if the new car dealers are going to have EVs around where we're going to be set up, a lot of times, they have their main display somewhere else, but then they don't have information. They don't have the cost of the vehicle. They don't have the range of the vehicle. And we should be asking, can they make sure they provide that? And also the tax credit for next year. And are they already registered with the IRS for the tax credit on the hood? So it would be nice if they're going to have those vehicles around us, they have that basic information right there where we can point to it, and so that we don't have to say, I don't know.
That makes sense. Well, as we Keith is talking with them, so as we speak more, we can bring that up.
Last year, I think it was last year, that they didn't really have very many EVs to represent, and so a lot of the members, the EV Association or whatever, brought their own vehicles in there, volunteered to bring out vehicles in there and put them on display. So we had some older cars and newer cars or whatever it may be, but we had a pretty good selection of EVs. Is what's happening this year for EV display in the auto show.
Well, the auto show this year has what they're calling the Electric Avenue. They're going to have a variety of vehicle manufacturers will be on display. And we are featured as the ambassadors. It actually mentions that volunteers from the Electric Vehicle Association will be available to provide valuable ownership information and advice to those considering the purchase of a plug-in vehicle. It's right up their website. So we are somebody.
But if it's a dealership association, then it means that pieces that don't have a dealership will not be represented. So you won't see any Teslas there, you won't see any Rivians there, you won't see any Lucids there.
No.
And you won't see any Apteras there for that matter.
And I'm not sure that the new car dealers want to have space that they're providing to us to be for the competition that aren't members of new car dealers.
Yeah, we understand that. We work with what we get.
Right. Todd, you've had your hand up there for a while. What do you want to add?
Oh, I just have two quick questions about the car show at the end of the month. Let's see, one of them, I presume they're not going to have the ability to test drive an EV during the show or near the show or as part of the show. And
I believe they are going to have test drives, but it would only be those from the dealers, but I don't know for positive.
Oh, okay.
They have done that in the past. I was thinking actually of the fully charged show. I think that was when we brought our own cars in.
Yeah,
our own cars, fully charged. I suspect that we'll have at least 3 or 4 different manufacturers that have all electric cars out front for the test drive. That's usually what we get.
Oh, that's good news. Yeah, my second question was, I'm wondering, do they take orders for cars during the show? And if they do they have any sort of special discounts?
No.
I don't think it's a sales event, but I've never gone looking to buy a car while I was at the show, so I really wouldn't know.
Yeah, what you'll see at the show as the representatives for the manufacturers is the professional presenters that are contracted by the OEMs to present the cars and explain the cars. Sometimes you'll see actual dealer reps or local dealership reps at the auto show, but that is kind of rare. And like what Bob says, this is not a sales event for them, so they're not trying to sell the cars.
But we are.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to sell
Sylvia.
EVs, no particular
EV.
brand.
EVs,
right.
yes.
Meet the people at their needs. Yeah.
Tom, you were waving your fingers in front of your camera, so did you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say that we're kind of at cross purposes to the OEMs and the new car dealers because of the elephant that isn't in the room.
Right.
And yeah, I found it somewhat dissatisfying to go to these auto shows because, you know, the format for them is to promote the existing dealership networks and OEMs. And so those of us that are really committed to EVs, we're just kind of we're the orphans, you know. The Apteras and the early adopters of Tesla and other EVs are kind of, we're kind of disregarded. So, but I think it's important that we show up. I'm definitely going to try to be there and volunteer. So
You bet.
yeah,
We're making lemonade, okay?
yeah.
And it's as long as that Jeep experience is down at the end, we're gonna get a lot of foot traffic, and it's gonna work out great.
Hey, Dave, are you going to be sending out details on how to go about volunteering and which shifts are available and so on?
Keith is still around to be able to manage that. That he has the link in the newsletter for I think it's volunteer at
EVAOSD.org.
Yeah, there you go.
If you're available,
Okay.
let us know what days you prefer and the times you prefer.
Bob's pretty much in Keith's absence. Bob's the lead for organizing our participation in the event.
Yeah, now that this meeting's over, we'll send out an email with more specific information on that. So far, it's just been up on the website and in Dave's newsletter.
I'm going to be there pretty much every day because I love this stuff.
Yeah, I wind up getting somewhat hoarse by the time I'm done with it. Several days of
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
communicating with all these people. And as noted earlier, there's a lot of people that are just negative and have nothing nice to say about EVs and keep harping on whatever their opinion is of why an EV can't work.
But it's been changing though in the last couple of years. There is.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
I think we do have to, that most recent about they're not selling, to address that and when they talk about that,
Well,
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Buenas noches.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me sit in with your meeting. Hopefully we can all meet here together in Jalapa over some tequila, mezcal, or whatever you need, okay? So you take care. All
Thanks, Roy.
success on your, yeah, I'll keep in touch, okay? Adios.
All right.
Buenas-
Okay, thank you, Roy. Good night.
I'm gonna check out too. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Well, I think it's probably wind up time unless somebody else has something else to add.
Oh, oh, Bob, you going to run this party all night? Come on.
No, not necessarily. I postponed my dinner so I could start the slideshow. So
Yeah.
Well, great job, Bob and Dave and the whole team. It was an excellent meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. See you guys at the auto show.